What is Putin's endgame in Ukraine? Hello, everyone. I'm Bobtheorc. It is March 7th, 2022. And let's talk about this for a little bit. So I have on the screen here a map of Ukraine with roughly where I think everyone is. In the red, we have the Russian army, and in the blue, we have the Ukrainian defenders. And this is based off of all the information I can get. It's entirely possible that Kiev is already surrounded based on reports from the mayor of Kiev. And it's likely that the forces in the east are surrounded, and perhaps even the Odessa area in the south. But this is at least where I know with reasonable certainty that the Russian forces are. So, if you recall, I originally didn't think Putin was going to go in deep into Ukraine because he didn't have the logistics to do it. And I'm not sure if something changed his mind, but that's sort of irrelevant at this point. You know, we're going to focus on what is and what is not. We're not going to really get into questions of right and wrong. Obviously, war is terrible and none of us like it. So, probably the most important piece of information that I've learned is that the Russian equivalent of their National Guard is moving into eastern Ukraine. And these guys are sort of like military police. As best as I understand it, they essentially specialize in domestic issues, in crowd control, in breaking up protests. Big surprise, Russia's not quite democratic in the way that the West is. Putin is effectively the Tsar of Russia, and he has certain control mechanisms that we don't necessarily have here in the West. And these Russian National Guard guys, my understanding, are sort of like domestic police force. They've never been deployed outside of Russia before, but they're essentially like militarized police. Here in America, we often complain about the giving all the army surplus equipment to the police. That seems to be what's going on there. So these guys are moving in, and that means that Putin's planning on holding territory. And I've always suspected that Putin would take and hold at least the separatist regions, and probably also grab and hold everything east of the Dnieper River. So what's likely to happen next is we're going to probably see the Russian forces encircle Kiev, encircle Odessa, maybe some landings down here, some amphibious, probably encircle the city, cut off whatever Ukrainian defense troops are down here. And I think that these forces in the east, which for the most part, this is where all those private military guys are. Any of the private armies that we hear about. Whenever Putin's making claims about neo-Nazis in Ukraine, he's talking about these guys. So I think these guys are going to get surrounded, and they're going to eventually get crushed, because that seems to be his primary military target. And you can argue, what they actually are, these Ukrainian military, they private army. My understanding is these are, at least from my time in Ukraine, I know that the oligarch of Dnipropetrovsk funded private armies, and I think a lot of these are his guys. So I think they're going to get surrounded, if they're not already surrounded as well. I know there's a lot of fighting going on in the outskirts of Kharkiv. It's uncertain how deep into the city the fighting has gotten. We know that the Russian military has been more careful than usual to avoid civilian casualties when they've gone into Chechnya and Georgia and places like that. They're usually not so careful. The Russian military is not designed to be careful, but in Ukraine they've been especially careful. And Putin's been talking about this. If you listen to any of his speeches, it doesn't matter if you believe him or not. What matters is that he controls the media in Russia, and so probably at least half the Russian people believe him. My impression when I've traveled through Russia is that probably at least half to 60% of the Russian people are favorable towards Putin, although from conversations with my friends, I get the impression that most of Russia does not like the war, and so Putin's going to have to wrap this up quickly, or he's going to start losing a lot of support. Not that it necessarily matters, because, you know, I don't think he has to really get elected. He's just sort of the effective czar of Russia. So I think we're going to see all this stuff get encircled. Now, Putin seems to be taking his time about things. Now, that could mean that the initial quick victory that he planned didn't happen. He's been having a lot of supply problems. And again, I don't think he ever deployed enough supplies to begin with. It seems that the troops that are surrounding the Kiev area, these northern troops, these seem to be mostly his conscripts using older Soviet equipment. They're the B team. They're not his top guys. My suspicion is that his better troops are trying to take Mariupol, connect the land bridge here in the south, and are probably going to be used in the Odessa area because Odessa is an important port. And his best troops are probably hammering the hell out of these private militias, because these would be probably Ukraine's more skilled fighters, and these are the people that are allegedly the neo-Nazis, and you can go look at various reporting to decide for yourself whether they are or not. But these are certainly the people that Putin said he's going to focus on, and it would seem that that's the case, that this is where he's focusing the bulk of his efforts. Now, I think that in the near future, you're going to see these guys essentially get wiped out. I think that you're going to see a stronger control in the east, and the battle over Kharkiv may not turn out to be that. There may be a lot more civilian casualties when he actually has to take Kharkiv. Kharkiv may not surrender, and he may end up having to send the guys in, sort of send the military in, because at least according to Putin's speeches, he says that the private armies, the neo-Nazis, are using human shields, putting if the translation is correct, it said that he's putting they're putting civilians on the middle floors, heavy weapons on the lower floors of apartment buildings, and snipers on the rooftops. Now, this could be true, or it could just be Putin setting the stage to prepare the Russian people for civilian casualties. And either could be the case. Obviously we can't trust anything that Putin says, and since he's in full control over the media in Russia, there's not really going to be any reliable fact-checking of that situation. And I'm certainly not going to Kharkiv to let you guys know what's there, and the people I know in Kharkiv are mostly taking shelter at this point. So I don't think we're going to get a lot of accurate information out of Kharkiv. If we see mountains of dead bodies, then we'll know what happened. But I don't think we're going to find out the truth until it's too late to do anything about it anyway. But either way, I think the East is going to get taken over, and eventually he's going to take over the South, and you'll see a collapse of the Ukrainian defense, and then everything's going to chill out. Now, and that could happen. I think he's going to be slow about it. I mean, it could happen within a week, but it might be a couple weeks. I think he's going to take his time and try and preserve his forces. China is backing Russia financially. The sanctions have already gone into place. So it's not going to get any worse for Putin at this point. So he has the luxury of time now. Originally, Zelensky had to play for time until the Russian supplies became untenable. But it's looking like the West is not going to go jumping in to aid Ukraine too much. I think they're going to still send in some weapons. But I have a feeling that I think the West is going to be measured in its response. I don't think NATO is going to risk a nuclear war with Russia. And I think everybody has pretty much agreed that Putin's already won Ukraine, at least the eastern part. And we may see the western Ukraine turn into an insurgency. And that's where it's going to get interesting from a military perspective. Now, Kiev could go either way. I don't think Putin's going to go just steamrolling into Kiev. because Kiev's going to be a very defensible city. The civilians are armed, and there's a lot of militias there, and I think it would turn into a bloodbath, probably on both sides. And certainly, from a political perspective, Putin can't have pictures of dead civilians, or he'll lose all. The Russian people are already not very happy about this war, and if they see a bunch of dead civilians, they're going to get pissed. And while Putin can suppress a certain amount of protesting in Russia, I think that there are limits to even his control over the population. So he still has to maintain kind of popular support, and I think he mostly suppresses the opposition, but he still has to maintain his supporters. So I don't think we're going to see a bloodbath in Kiev. I think it's going to be more like siege warfare, and Kiev's either going to surrender, or he might send people in, but I think it's going to be very slow and careful whatever happens. So I think that we could see the East and the South wrap up relatively quickly within the next few weeks. It could go faster. It depends on how aggressive he wants to play this. And I don't know, I don't pretend to know his mind. Now, here's the interesting part. So, Kiev could surrender, and it could end up it could really go either way. But I think that I think it's really a flip of the coin. My gut feeling is that Kiev will eventually run out of supplies. I don't think that a modern city is prepared for a siege. And if we see civilians... Now, according to Putin, the Russian army is going to let civilians leave. Whether that's true or not, who knows? If we see a lot of civilians leave Kiev to where the civilian casualties would be minimum, then I think he might go in. But as long as there's civilians in the city, I think he's going to try and wait it out. Now, in the central area of Ukraine, that's going to be a little dicey. So, like, these cities along the Dnieper River are pretty industrialized. I know that Dnepropetrovsk has a big tech sector, a big industrial sector. I believe that's where a lot of the Soviet-era nuclear weapons were developed. I know a bunch of my friends work for American tech companies there, or at least used to. A lot of them have moved either to America or to the European Union proper. But these are definitely cities along the river that Putin's going to want. Further inland, this is going to be mostly agricultural land, but it would make sense to secure this whole region and just shore up the supply lines. So this is kind of up in the air. Now, what might happen if Kiev surrenders, I could see Russia absorbing the East and the South and turning the West into sort of a neutral, autonomous area, kind of remake Ukraine as a smaller Ukraine. But it's also possible that we may see the actual borders of Kiev of Ukraine maintained, and turned into a neutral, autonomous region, essentially a puppet government of Russia. And the reason you might see this is Zelensky has a lot of support among the more liberal Western Ukrainians, but one of the reasons he won such a landslide victory, I think, is because the conservatives in the West and the South that are generally more pro-Russia, they didn't vote in that election. So it'd be kind of like in the U.S., if Texas and Florida were to declare independence, then you would probably see the Democrats win every election from now until the end of time on a national level, because there wouldn't be enough conservatives left in America to maintain the balance. And we may have seen that happen in Ukraine when these areas broke away and when Russia took Crimea. So it may be a political strategy to maintain the borders of Ukraine just to keep a more pro-Russian electoral balance. But it wouldn't surprise me if Putin just grabs up the East and the South that are generally pro-Russia anyway, or at least more favorable to Russia, and then do something artificial in the western areas that are going to be more pro-EU. Because remember, western Ukraine used to be part of Poland back before World War II. So you could even see this area just revert to Poland, but I think it'd be more likely that you would see this as an autonomous neutral region, kind of a demilitarized zone. Or you could see Belarus do something crazy, but I'm not sure they're going to do that. So anyway, regarding the sanctions, I don't think Putin cares about the sanctions. My understanding is that China's backing them financially. A lot of the Russian oligarchs had already gotten their money out of the West, so there's not a lot for us to take. We can take a few yachts and things like that. But the oligarchs are generally pretty well protected because they sort of anticipated sanctions after the 2014 problems. So right now it seems to me that the sanctions are mostly just hurting the Russian people. One of my Russian friends is saying that she can't get replacement contact lenses anymore. I'm sure China will step in and start providing stuff for the Russian people, and I'm sure that if we stop buying Russian gas, that they're going to build pipelines to supply China with all the fuel that China needs. So I don't think the sanctions are going to work. I think that Putin's going to probably pull this one off at this point. A lot of it's going to come down to whether Ukraine turns into another Afghanistan with insurgency fighting back, or whether the Ukrainian people go ahead and capitulate. Remember, a lot of them have strong ties to Russia, especially in the east and in the south. So this could kind of go either way, but I think that this is sort of where we're going to see the final map. And I think that the fact that Putin's sending in his National Guard, essentially his civilian crowd control police, I think that he's anticipating taking everything east of the Dnieper River and probably the south as well. So I'll keep doing some research, and I'll make another video once I have a little bit more to say. But this is kind of where we're at. So I hope everybody likes this. Please like and subscribe. Share the video around. I hope you found this information useful. Leave some comments and questions, and I'll be happy to address them in the future. Or hit me up on Twitter and Facebook, and I'll be happy to share my thoughts and answer any other questions you have. Thank you very much, and everybody stay safe. Goodbye.